Hi, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us today, and we're very happy to have Professor Stéphane Arguillère with us and to see lots of new faces and people from all over the world. So thank you for joining us. And it's a real pleasure to welcome Professor Arguillère today. As probably many of you have seen, he has such an extensive curriculum of studies spanning so many traditions and areas. And today he's going to actually be talking about the intersection of two areas, which he told me he's quite happy they're new materials for him about Dzogchen and the fifth Dalai Lama, which he's been now recently working on. He's actually prepared a very large, extensive presentation, which will be turned into a paper. We were just discussing this a few minutes ago. So in the future, we'll also be happy to read the paper. Because he has a lot of material to present, we decided that he'll talk for about 50 minutes now, and then we'll have some questions and we can see, according to the audience, what we would like to hear more about. He's happy to take it from there. So thank you all for joining us. I'll pass the word to Stéphane, and thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Stéphane.
Hello to all. Thank you, Jamian, for your kind invitation. So I hope the topic will be of some interest to at least some of you. Of course, I know quite some of the audience, and I'm very honored of some very distinguished colleagues to be present. I'm not a specialist of the fifth Dalai Lama. I've been for some years I've got more and more interested in the issue of his role in the Nyingma tradition, and in fact his role as a Nyingma author himself. And so I'm a bit exploring that. And the thing is, it intersects to some extent the research that we have, our ongoing research. I mean, we have a small funded project called A Critical History of the Northern Treasures, FCHNT, that's now about to, close to its conclusion, because we've been working for nearly 4 years. So the grant is about over. And in this context, of course, the fifth Dalai Lama is extremely important, because the Jangter, the Northern Treasures, is a lineage in the Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism that counts the fifth Dalai Lama as one of their lineage masters. So, and in fact, the Nyingma writings of the fifth Dalai Lama are pretty understudied, and I find them very interesting. So, to be very plain and honest, to start with, I have no access to the Sanwa Jiatien, so the secret visions, except the Samden Karma's book. So I've not taken that into account for this presentation. It's mainly based on the Nyingma writings, the abundant Nyingma writings that are present in the fifth Dalai Lama's Sungbum, like complete writings. So let's start if you like. Yeah. Okay. Can you see my PowerPoint thing clearly? Yes. Okay. So as some of you know, I've kindly complained because the illustration is not fit, because in fact the form of but it's okay. The form of Yamantaka I will be discussing is not that one. It's not Dojijigje Vajrabhairava, but it's a typical Nyingma form, which is different. But it's okay anyway. I found it interesting. I see we are honored to have Professor Brian Cuevas presence among the audience. So it's very interesting because it intersects with his lectures in Paris, in which he discussed the topic of the way Tsongkhapa added a sort of Dzogrim completion phase practice to Vajrabhairava. So in this case, it's about the fifth Dalai Lama, maybe, I don't know where it comes from, but the fifth Dalai Lama maybe adding not Dzogrim, but Dzogchen phase to another form of Yamantaka. So the fifth Dalai Lama is very well known, of course, as a statesman. And it is also well known that he was a patron of the Nyingmapas, especially for Mindoling, Dojejak, and Dzogchen Monastery, which he funded, supported, and so forth. But it's known that he was a very productive or prolific writer, but it is not known. It is not very well known, I think, that he wrote a lot of Nyingma literature. So I think it's fine to start with a sort of overview of the Fifth Dalai Lama's writings, very simply on the basis of the 2009 edition, book format edition. I don't know why there is sort of orange line, well, whatever. So globally, the first four volumes are the record of teachings received, which is an extremely important source material for the Nyingma traditions, incidentally, like volume 3 and 4 are all only about Nyingma traditions. And it's very important also in terms of, like we have the complete catalogs of some termas, which may be lost or at least unavailable for the moment, but also like classification of Nyingma tantras and things like that, which are very precious. Volumes 5 to 7 conclude the very famous autobiography, which was partly translated by Samten Karme, and which is known as both, how do you say, a masterpiece of Tibetan literature and poetry, and an important source of historic information. Then there is another biography, long biography by the Sisanje Gyamtso. So it's called the Chi and Tumong, like outer and ordinary. Then the two next volumes contain biographies of various masters by the Fifth Dalai Lama himself. So that's also very interesting, like well, there is someone, for example, at the background, which I will not discuss today, but we discussed it a little bit with Brian Cuevas, which is, for example, Tsarchen Losel Gyamtso, the Sakya master, the origin of the Tsarpa tradition branch of the Sakya school, who was also an incredible compiler of all sorts of tradition, including Nyingma ones. So then volumes 13 and 14 are all sorts of ritual or practice texts, mostly for Sarma, like non-Nyingma traditions, except for protector rituals, which come from Nyingma tradition, and also the Tamdin Sangduk, the secret practice of Hayagriva, which is also an old Nyingma tradition originally, but which was passed in Shangpa lineage. Well, I will not discuss that one, but as you will see, Tamdin Hayagriva will come back soon. And then we have purely Gelug or scholastic writings, volumes 15, 16, 17. So it's not that much, as you can see in the global mass. And when I say purely Gelug, I must confess that I have not read them. So, for example, I'm extremely curious about how, and I will discuss that a little bit later, but that's a complete puzzle for me at the moment, how the Fifth Dalai Lama combines Gelug and Nyingma views. For example, he made a commentary on the what you call Madhyamaka by Chandrakirti, and it would be very curious and interesting to know if he's following completely Gelug views in this commentary, and in that case, how he may have, I mean, what was his personal understanding of the way to combine these views, which in like philosophically are just incompatible, I mean, logically incompatible. I suspect that he's a little bit like the much later Rime masters. Is more like adding or combining things, like traditions must be preserved in their own, how do you say, original flavor and context without any mixture, without any synthesis. So I suspect that his Gelug writings are purely Gelug, in the same way as his Nyingma writings, which I've read, are really purely orthodox in Nyingma terms. Not only the doctrine, but even the ritual structure and all. And he's insisting on the fact that you should not present Nyingma sadhanas in another way than the Nyingma one. Like you should not use like a Sarma, whatever, Sarma general ideas on tantras to present Nyingma practices. And then there are more like volume 18 is like various prayers and rituals, praise to various lamas and so forth, which are not tightly connected to any specific tradition, whether Geluk or other Sarma traditions or Nyingma. Then volume 19 is like historical and political writings. Volumes 20, 21 seems to me, I've not read them, but like accounts of the fifth Dalai Lama's achievement, including the restoration of ancient buildings and all. So we could say it's politics in the most general sense. And volume 22 is more of the same topic plus letters, most of them in verse. Volume 23 and 24 are also out of a topic, like volume 23 is rules and regulations for various monastic institutions and a commentary on the Nyingma Melon. Well, I say out of a topic, but this would deserve being checked because, for example, it's the fifth Dalai Lama who reinforced the practice of Hayagriva in Serajie and made special regulation for it. So it's like a tiny, purely Nyingma island in a purely Gelug institution. In the same way as you may know that a lot of the protectors' rituals, for example, all the system around the Nechung oracle and all this is purely Nyingma. So like you have a lot of situations in which Gelug monks are performing Nyingma rituals. And not all of this, like for example, for Serajie, it does not come from the fifth Dalai Lama, but most of this was reinforced and I don't know, stabilized and like institutionalized or the institutions were reinforced by the fifth Dalai Lama. So volume 24 are more prayers and auspicious verse, which is not relevant for us. And then we reach the four big volumes of Nyingma writings. So if you consider that, I think that in a sort of modern book shape edition like that, the Sanwa Gyatien, like the Secret Visions, would be two more volumes, big volumes. So it means that there's like the equivalent of 6 volumes of 30, which are just Nyingma things. And that's quite a lot if you consider that part of the rest is not like Gelug things, but it's like political writings, autobiography, and so forth. So within these 4 volumes, so if we let the Sacred Visions aside, volume 26 in this edition, so that's a 2009 edition, is an all Yamantaka volume, or we should say an all Mañjuśrī volume, but most of which is devoted to Yamantaka. So that's the form of Yamantaka that we are interested in. I don't know if I can make it larger. Yeah, so sorry, it's not very good because it's a photo of a photo. So sorry, it's from a catalog. I'm sorry, I did not give the source information, but I can of course give it to you anytime, maybe when we stop if anybody is interested. But you see, that's a purely Nyingma form of Yamantaka, so it completely looks like Heruka. If you maybe it's more familiar with Vajrakila, it looks pretty similar in many ways. So that's this form. It's called Chagyazilnun, so like something like mudra that crushes with splendor or something like that. And that's I mean that's not the only Yamantaka practice in the Nyingma tradition. But well, I wrote a large paper and it's called the Yamantaka Among the Ancients in the Revue d'études Tibetan. If you'd like, it's like 70 pages with all sorts of details. But it's a very curious and interesting case in the Nyingma literature because this is a large 11th century terma. I mean, when I say large, with all its appendices, it's been published in the Dzogchen Chojik, like the compilation of the Northern Treasures. It's not Northern Treasures; it's much more ancient. But the case is that the Dzogchen masters and the Digung Kagyupas are practicing it intensely. So they are like the heirs of this system, which is otherwise common to the Nyingmapas. Well, the very curious thing it's that it is an old terma, 11th century. I think it's the oldest terma we have complete, Nyingma terma that we really have complete now that it's been included in the Dzogchen Chojik. So for the Tibetologists, it's a real treasure. And the strange thing is that when I say it's an exception in the Nyingma world, is that an ancient terma is regarded more or less as ultimate, perfect, nothing to be added. And I mean, there have been further, like later, Yamantaka termas, but this old one is still regarded as very, I mean, as the perfection of the style, sort of. So it's still practice. It's a bit secret. I don't know why it's not really talked about. But for example, Mipham was very fond of it. I mean, except the Dzogchen masters. It has a strong reputation of aggressive magic. And I will get back to it after. But Mipham was a practitioner of that. For example, there is even a story in his biography that to show that the blessings of this old Dharma had not vanished, he recited the mantra, and then the mountain in front, there was like a landslide or something, like it half collapsed because of the strength of the mantra. Mantra is very strange, it's like 157 syllables with all the elements corresponding to all the deities in the mandala. It's a pretty special practice. All the deities are a bit curious and all. So yeah. But well, to bring it to what interests us, it's basically pure Mahayoga. And if you look into these 10 volumes, there is one vague text about Zorim, completion phase, but about zero. I mean, globally, it's only development phase with a lot of rites, including very strange things like building a stupa for enhancing your power, your magic power. But basically, it's a practice that has been used to protect Tibet, like against invasions and all. Well, that's a little addition, last minute addition I made. So maybe I think some of those who are present are aware of who is Terchen. So it's not Yerchen, so it's just a typo. Terchen Nuden Dorje. So Terchen Nuden Dorje is the 19th century Terton of whom Lama was supposed to be the Tülku. So I'm just back from Kham, so that's a picture I took. This tartan, so recent tartan had a yangter, like I've invented this word to retreasure something. It means yangter, like re-terma. It means like rediscovering a terma that was already discovered, sometimes lost, sometimes it's still available, but it's meant to refresh the blessing. So that's the place in a holy site called Tsori Demcho Doji Shukchang, so Doji Shukchang in short, where he had a yangter, where he retreasured this cycle, which is called Mañjuśrī, Master of Life. So my informant was the father of the reincarnation of Sia Lama, Tunglo, told me that it's exactly the same. So it's not been included in his termas. It just refreshes the blessings of the lineage as they. But you can see it's a little bit special case, because like for Vajrakila, for example, you'd have new termas coming again and again, and with a tendency to practice the latest one as if it was the single most powerful one. Except for in Jangter, they practice Jangter Purba, which is for 14th century, a little bit more conservative. But like in many other branches, they practice recent termas, preferably. So now, what about Mañjuśrī's Dzogchen, so Jampel Dzogchen? So it's a 12th century terma, and the root texts are, as far as I know, completely unavailable. So far, I mean, in Tibet, few things are lost forever. So it may be somewhere in the Potalas collections or something like that. But I will just briefly show you a long, a complete catalog that is in the Fifth Dalai Lama's record of teachings received, which has, I think, 47 texts. So it must have been like, I don't know, 2 volumes or something like that. But now it's all lost. I mean, except for maybe a few texts are still present here and there, but globally it's lost. So the tartan is called Sarben Chorme. So Sar Ben means a Buddhist monk. Sar, I don't know. Normally it must be the place where he came, but I don't know. And Chokme means like no directions, in the sense of impartial. So. And what remains presently available is the text I'm about to discuss by the Fifth Dalai Lama, which is included in his complete writings and also in the Rinchen Terze. So this cycle is in the Terze, but in fact, when you get the Lunga empowerment, you just get it from the description that I'm about to describe. I mean, from the unique text of the Fifth Dalai Lama. And it's a curious Dzogchen text, as it cannot be clearly ascribed to the classical subdivisions of Semdech Longde Mengade, but it's pretty clear that it has luminous visions, so it must be Mengade. The fifth dilemma even uses the terms Chekchu and Togel in this context, and there is some of the terminology of the Nyingtik, but not all. Like you'd not get the 4 or 6 lamps, for example, but you get like the name of the 4 visions, for example. So that's a bit curious. The only section of Dzogchen which is alluded to, but I will show you the passage. It's not unambiguous. Is a Chiti. Maybe you're aware that in some divisions, I mean, you have Semde, Longde, Mengade, and then Mengade is further divided into Chi, Nang, Sang, Yang, Sang, like outer, inner, secret, and outermost secret. But another division is with Ati, Ati as a part of Mengade, actually. Ati, Chiti, Yangti, Tachen, the division in 4. So Tachen is something we know zero about, if it ever existed as real instructions or text. But then the Ati, Chiti, and Yangti are something we know, but with a sort of a problem, because one of the problem is the Yangti. Many of you may have heard of Yangti Narpo, the black quintessence, which is the visionary practice meant for practice in full darkness, like dark retreats in Mipham. But on the one hand, you have other sections of Yangti or texts supposed to be Yangti, which do not look that advanced. For example, you have Guru Chewang's Yangti Sangyeni Abjor, and it's difficult to know if it has the full instructions on the visionary development. And also another issue is, and you have Yangti Jamze, the Brahmins Yangti, which is also something for which we have tantras, but maybe no practice text available. And another strange point is that the tantras seems to be partly common, or there is a hesitation between what is Chiti and what is Yangti. And I will come back to it later because it's interesting, in fact. Okay, so an interesting feature for us, I mean, why I got so curious about that text before I was really interested in the fifth Dalai Lama is because Rigdzin Godem, so you know Rigdzin Godem is the Tibetan who is the origin of the Northern Treasures. So his dates are 1337 and he died in 1401, we think now. I mean, thanks to our colleague Tampatering Batsang, we think that the traditional date 1408 or 9 is not correct. Okay, so anyway, it's like a younger contemporary of Longchenpa, if you like, or contemporary of Dorji Lingpa. And so he's in the lineage which is a bit uncommon, like normally he appears in records of teachings received only as a terton, but in that case he appears as a lineage master. Whether it is a genuine historical fact or something maybe invented or believed by Jandata Shitobgyal, very, very important 16th century master of the Northern Treasures. So now why should there be any connection with the Mañjuśrī master of life? That's the weakest part of my reasoning, I confess. So I mean, it's what puzzled me originally also, but I'm not sure. I have no firm conclusions on that. So I just present you the reasoning, and it's still completely open. So to state it frankly and clearly, the idea of such connections is not something well established and generally admitted in the Nyingma tradition. The actual fact in the actual practice, as it is being performed in the Nyingma tradition for centuries, is that before, I mean, if you get into this practice of a Mañjuśrī master of life, so this cycle around this deity Charya Zinnan, before you get into the wrathful practice of this deity, the deity of the illustration, you have to accomplish a peaceful Mañjuśrī practice. The original peaceful Mañjuśrī practice is described in a part of the cycle that's called the Iron Scorpion, Chaldik. In fact, it's very interesting. Why it is called Chaldik because, well, there are reasons, but one of the reasons is all the instructions are given by analogy to the parts of the body of a monstrous iron scorpion, the chagdik. So it's called chagdik because it's the comparison to the parts of the body of this creature are used to order the cycle, or maybe for the practitioners to memorize all the instructions and be sure they have received everything. And so normally there was a peaceful Mañjuśrī practice in that system, but it has been replaced for centuries by a peaceful Mañjuśrī practice borrowed from Gyalpa Dzogchen, Mañjuśrī Dzogchen. So in fact, this may be the only reason that led me to my maybe wrong conclusion. My conclusion, I mean, what I suppose is that Mañjuśrī's Dzogchen can have been viewed as the Dzogchen part of that cycle, or the innermost part of the Yamantaka, Nyingma Yamantaka practices. But in fact, it's nowhere stated formally or clearly. So it's only my speculation for the moment. And in fact, the basis for this speculation is that I found lineages from Gyalpa Dzogchen, so Mañjuśrī Dzogchen, in Gyalpa Tseda, so Yamantaka context. But maybe it's only because that's the lineage for the peaceful Mañjuśrī practice that they do as an introduction to the whole. However, I have a number of clues. I mean, because I'm also interested in, but that I will not discuss today, the way in which Rigdzin Godem may have been a practitioner of this system of Yamantaka. But the fundamental reason, which still is not convincing to Tibetan scholars, I mean, I've tried it especially on Khenpo Khenpo, who is very, very amazing Nyingma scholar in Dharamsala, and he told me, he did not tell me it's absurd, but he told me it's not commonly admitted in the Nyingma tradition. The point is, the fundamental reason is the fact that the empowerment for Mañjuśrī, Master of Life, so Yamantaka, if you like, is absolutely complete. I mean, normally you don't have something in an empowerment that would not correspond to a part of the practice you're supposed to do. I mean, the clearest cases are things like Hevajra, for example. I mean, basically the sadhana is a self-empowerment. I mean, and all the parts of the practice corresponds to parts of the empowerment. And that's logical, that's normal. That's how it should be. But in that case, you have a full 4 empowerments, but it seems we have practices only for the first one. You know, because like for the second one, you should have 2 more. The third one, like sexual yogas, to say it simply. And for the fourth one, could be something that looks like Dzogchen. Although in the Sarma tradition, generally, you have just no practice. It's just the view that you reach when you practice the completion phase, and that's all. But in a Nyingma context, it's very, very complete. So you could formally, you could have, I mean, it's not that you could, but given the structure of the empowerment, you should have 2 more instructions, sexual yogas and various body techniques instructions. And then you could have Dzogchen elaborate instructions, which are found nowhere in the 10 volumes of text. So when I asked Gyalpa about that, he told me that's very common with Mahayoga. But still, it's a bit puzzling. It's a bit curious. I mean, it's worthy of a reflection. And so, and the second reason is the fact that this Mañjuśrī's Dzogchen lineage is presented in some contexts of Mañjuśrī Master of Life. And that even the text that I will be discussing is found in a completely Mañjuśrī Master of Life context. So there can be an intention. They may, but it's a bit speculative. So, okay, now I dropped the question. I mean, whether actually it's the case or not. But I mean, the question is interesting as such. So just to say a few words, I mean, basically the Gyalpa Tseda is really a practice focused on defending the teaching. It's clearly said, like if you go into that, then you take commitment to protect the teaching by destroying its enemies. So it's a bit like Vajrakila, it's a bit similar. And it seems to be the main focus, and even the main reason of the interest of the 5th Dalai Lama in that, like in the context of a combination, you know, of religion, political power, magic, I mean, with the idea that that was the most powerful available practice to repel, especially enemies, but not only outer enemies or visible ones. I mean, there are really practices to kill people. I mean, you can put their name in the mantra to get them dead. So I mean, it's very clear. But also, I mean, from a passage in the autobiography of Rigdzin Pemachinle, so the third Rigdzin Khenpo, the third second reincarnation of Rigdzin Godem, if you like. Sorry, third reincarnation, fourth Rigdzin Godem. Sorry, and there is a discussion with the fifth Dalai Lama. The fifth Dalai Lama orders him to get him rid of, Shugden, of the spirits, the evil spirits. And that's I'm quoting Tempa Tsering Batsang, who may be actually among the audience, but I've not seen. So Rigdzin Pema Chinle like the fifth Dalai Lama asks him, what will you use to get rid of, to kill, basically to kill this spirit? And Pema Chinle answers, Rigdzin Pema Chinle answers, well, wrathful Padmasambhava would do, but this Yamantaka is Tzeda, the master of life, is even more powerful. So it's very interesting. I mean, now I skip the topic, but it's very interesting because that's not the commonplace opinion in present day Nyingma school. So it's because this Yamantaka is a little bit out-fashioned in the Nyingma tradition, and it's very interesting also to realize that there is history even in the main yidams of a lineage. So it's still practiced, but it's like it's not that famous, except in the Northern tradition, which is a bit archaic compared to the dominant trends of the Nyingma tradition, especially in Kham and like that. Okay, so to be honest, I think that the main motivation of the fifth Dalai Lama in his, I mean, why he composed this whole volume of Nyingma Yamantaka materials is, I think, more connected to magic. Okay, so that's basically things I've already said. Yeah. So just a little more excursus before reaching to my point. And actually, that's not how do you say, out of the topic. I mean, it's really interesting, I think. So the idea of well, like in Mahayoga, normally in Mahayoga practice, normally you don't have two stages, but three, like Kirim, Dzogrim, Dzogchen. Development stage, completion stage or phase, and Dzogchen. So it's pretty normal that you should expect to have Dzogchen at the end when you have done the completion phase practices like Tumo and so forth. But I mean, it has been thought that I mean, by various scholarly colleagues who discussed the history of Dzogchen, that this Dzogchen, which was originally part of a tantric sadhana, then became autonomous. So I don't want to discuss that, but the general idea was that this so-called Dzogchen originally was just, is as like Sakya Pandita says, my Mahamudra, by opposition to the Kagyapas, my Mahamudra is the view of the completion phase, and it means that's just the state of the fourth joy when you've reached the fourth joy in your tantric body techniques, and that's all. There is no more. There is no autonomous Mahamudra or whatever. But it has, I think it has not been thought that this Dzogchen that was the end of the tantric sadhana or the coronation of the tantric sadhana could be a Dzogchen with full visionary system. And of course, we find that, for example, if you read the Longchenpa's commentary on the Sangwan Ningpo, it has the four Tuggle, four visions and all. But I mean, it could be thought that it's like later things, and like later additions, that it's when someone like Longchenpa who has a full, thorough knowledge of the texture toggle system just pasted it using, I don't know, as in French we say pretext, like it looks like excuses, like I mean, just you abusing some words in the text. But in fact, it may be more complicated, and I recently got interested into something else, which is also interesting because it's also in this Geluk Nyingma interface, which is the practice of most secret Hayagriva, so Tamjin Sanklopa. So it's also very ancient. I mean, the terma is 11th century too, the original terma. It's practiced in Serradie, actually. There's a group of monks that are specialists of this practice. And it's very interesting when you see them practicing because it's pure Nyingma ritual in the pure Gelug context. That's very interesting. So just to say a few words. So this terma is as ancient, I think, as Mañjuśrī Master of Life. The story is a bit strange because it was found by 3 Tibetans and all of them had a horrible fate. One died, one got leprosy, and one turned insane. As Professor Brian Coev has noticed, the story is in the biography of Ralo Tsawa because in that context, he's said to be the one who killed the one, gave leprosy to the other, and turned the third one insane. But that. I mean, it's. I don't know if you have that in English. In French, we say you lend only to the riches, to the rich. The idea is because there was so many history of him killing everybody, so they associated him with the story. But I mean, it's historically the only point that is historically relevant is that the 3 Tibetans and Ralotsawa are really same period of time, more or less, so 11th century. So then this the lineage was, I mean, the lineage which was not working of the 3 Tibetans who had a horrible fate was passed still, like just the text, to one called Druptop Darcharwa. And this Darcharwa is it's 12th century figure because he was contemporary of Nyingma. He had a vision of Padmasambhava, who then gave him the empowerments, instructions, and told him to modify the mantra. So the first syllable of the mantra has been turned from Om to Shri. That's the story. And then there's been a continuous lineage of which the Gelugpas are the heirs, but it's also in the Rinchen Terzo. So now I mean, I don't know what the Gelugpas know, what they practice of the completion phase of that, but in the Rinchen Terzo, you have a text about the Dzogchen, so normally completion phase, which has the instructions for the 4 luminous visions, as in Togal. So my point is that there are corpora, like there are groups of texts that seem to be very ancient and that have these visionary Dzogchen complete instructions in their completion phase. So as this practice is also supposed to be pure Mahayoga and analogous to Mañjuśrī Master of Life from the same period of time, and with many people who practice it without any Dzogchen instruction, it shows the possibility, I mean, of the existence of such instructions not being that well known. And not just to touch a point that's the maybe most daring hypothesis I will make today. Incidentally, Hayagriva and Vajravarahi have the deities for the practice of the 2nd and 3rd empowerment in the Khandro Nyingtik, and hence in the Gompa Zangtel too. And it would deserve being investigated whether there is not a sort of Hayagriva Vajrayogini Dzogchen on the one hand, and a sort of Mañjuśrī Dzogchen on the other one, because you may know that also Mañjuśrī is pretty central in the Yangtik tradition. So I mean that's just something, a pure speculation. Okay, so no, well, the practice manual that I will now describe is it's not explicit, it's not clear about the category of Dzogchen to which the cycle belongs, but at some point, I will show you the text later, the 5th Dalai Lama mentions Chiti, but it's not unambiguous because it just says that the tantras, the Mañjuśrī tantras, which are the root or the basis of that cycle, or on which that cycle is grounded, can be interpreted in the sense of Chiti. So it does not amount to a complete explicit ascription to that cycle, to the Chiti. So on Chiti, just to remind you of the existence of a paper by Jean-Luc Achard, The View of Chiti Yoga. So It's in the Revue d'études Tibetan, so it's freely downloadable. If you just look up the Ashar, the view of Chitti Yoga, and you find it and you can download it, and it's very informative. And well, the point is, an interesting detail is that in his bibliography, Jean-Luc Achard gives a common list of Chitti and Yangti tantras. So it all seems that there is a sort of common family of Mañjuśrī associated Dzogchen. That is the basis of either Chitti or Yangti interpretations and practices. So my vague hypothesis is also that this Mañjuśrī Dzogchen belongs to that and maybe is the most archaic of the cycles belonging to this family. So I think this thread could be pulled further, but I will not discuss that now. If you are interested, we can discuss that, but it's maybe a bit over specialized. Okay, so I mean, to understand more globally what is Mañjuśrī Dzogchen, it's not, I mean, the clearest information is not in the text I'd like to present if I finally reach it, and if you are not exhausted when I reach it. It's in the Fifth Dalai Lama's record of teachings received, so I give the reference. So in fact, we know very little about the Tibetan, Sarben Chome. I mean, we can just date him because it's said somewhere he was associated to Nyingmapas, and also from like the lineages that stem from him, and it gives the place where the terma was found. But I mean, it's very, very meager information, I mean, on him as a person. And what I mean, well, also, yeah, the Fifth Dalai Lama, either in his practice manual or in this record of teachings received, it does not ascribe the cycle to any section of Dzogchen clearly. So what we can extract from all this is that the lineage is said to stem from Manjushri Mitra. So it's pretty interesting because it's one of these termas in which Padmasambhava does not play the central role, which is also a pretty archaic feature. I've not said, but in the Mañjuśrī Master of Life in the Yamantaka system, the central role is played by Nupchen Sangye Yeshe, not Padmasambhava. Very, very interesting for many reasons too. The basic scripture is said to be Jampa Yutru Tawa, but that's pretty vague because it's like the Mañjuśrī Maya Jala, but Yutru Tawa is like, how do you say, nebulous. I mean, it's something. Basically, it means Mahayoga Tantras. You know, it's supposed to, like, many of the Mahayoga Tantras are supposed to be extraction from an enormous Urtext, enormous primordial Tantra, which is called Gyudutawa, so the net of magical illusions. And it's sometimes not very clear what it is really. And another thing is the importance of the Mañjuśrī Nama Sangiti. Sorry, there's a slight little typo on Sangiti. And the commentary was included. So there is a Padmasambhava commentary which is included in this corpus that we have. So that corpus is not completely lost. But no, yeah. Okay, I will not comment that, but that's the list of the 47 texts. Maybe there are some mistakes in the division of the lines, but you see, I mean, the point is, it was a pretty large corpus, and it seems we have about 0 of that left. So I'm a bit talking into the void, but I mean, my speech is a bit lacking strong basis because we only have this text by the Fifth Dalai Lama. So yeah, maybe I can skip a strange story that the Fifth Dalai Lama says about Janda Tashi Topgel. In fact, Janda Tashi Topgel, who is I did not write his dates, but he's like a second half of 16th century, very important figure in the Northern Treasures tradition. Is the one actually he was the Jandak in that. Now the Janda means the holder of the. Is the like the regent of the Northern Treasures tradition when there is no Rigdzin Chemo, no Tülku of Rigdzin Godem. You know, that's the case now. The Rigdzin Chemo has just died in Lhasa. It was very old. And no, there must be a Janda. The Janda in that case means holder of the Northern Treasures lineage. But originally it was it means like the Duke of Jiang or something like that. It's very strange if you think of it historically because it's a title of nobility that became a religious title. It's Jiang is a region, it's Jiang Amling, in fact. It's like if you have, I don't know, Duke of Normandy becomes a title for an archbishop. So it's a bit funny. So who is not even in that region anymore. So, but so this man, Janda Tashitobgyal, was actually the Duke of Jiang, or sort of the master of Jiang, and he was cast out. That's all. That is the history of the Tsang region of central Tibet, and he moved then to the U region of central Tibet, and that's how the Dorje Dak monastery was started, basically, to simplify it. So I skipped the story. So and that what you found below is just the lineage down from the Chukukun to Zampo, from the Dharmakaya Samantabhadra down to the Tah Zahor Bende, me, the monk of Zahor, which is the fifth Dalai Lama actually. So what is interesting in this, so Tertön Sarbek Chome is the Tertön, and then Rigdzin Goki Demchu, that's Rigdzin Godem, the origin of the Northern Treasures. And Chogyal Tashitobgyal is the man I've just been discussing, Janda Tashitobgyal. So that was how this lineage became interesting for us. I mean, in our Jiangtel research, Northern Treasures research group, is because Rigdzin Godem is there too. And it's a bit puzzling because the Lama Batonpel, who is just before him in the list, is completely unknown. So we cannot say whether it's one of the 3 or 4 known masters of Rigdzin Godem or someone else. And so we can also not confirm whether this lineage has any historical value or not. Although there is a commentary of on the Mañjuśrī Namasangiti attributed to Rigdzin Godem in the compilation of the Northern Treasures, which would make great sense in that context. But unfortunately, that commentary is impossible to authentify because it was not well known to tradition. It's taken just from one manuscript, and its content has no, I mean, there is no way from his content to ascertain that is really by Rigdzin Godem. I mean, there is no, like, there is no story of how we got the teaching or whatever. It's just a summary of Padmasambhava, of the commentary attributed to Padmasambhava. Okay, I think I'm reaching the the text itself. So maybe it's a right juncture to make a break because it was pretty dense. So what is ahead of us is the description of the text and some conclusions, or like try to suggest further possible research. And in fact, what I propose is now we can have a discussion. And then when I restart, I don't go through the description of the text, or I just give you a very quick overview. But maybe we can move directly to the Dzogchen, the completion phase instructions, in which you'll see that it's in the context of a peaceful Mañjuśrī sadhana, you get really Dzogchen instructions. So, and I think that will fill the time that is left. So for the moment, I think we can take a little break and discuss if you'd like. And I mean, and please feel free to ask questions that will help me to handle the second part and to know what to focus on according to your interests. Okay, so I don't know how to organize the discussion. I leave it to Jamyang, maybe.
Thank you so much, Stéphane. Yes, I'm not very good at organizing discussions either. I think there are quite a few of your colleagues in here who might have more sort of technical or specific questions. I mean, I'm just curious to see the text myself now that you've given such a nice context. But yeah, if anybody has questions, please, you can just unmute yourselves, or you can type them in the chat, or yeah, Alexandra, please.
Hello, first of all, thank you, Stéphane, for your highly interesting presentation with a lot of exciting details that I think are really worth of worth to investigate. I'm really inspired by it. And I have a question, a general question for those of us who just started studying or are non-specialists. Just a general kind of question. In the beginning of your presentation, you've mentioned that there are Nyingma systems and Gelug systems. For example, you said that the system of Nechung oracle practice is purely Nyingma. So I would like to know what, in your view, makes a certain system or a practice Nyingma, and what are the distinguishing characteristics of a system which can be ascribed to the Nyingma tradition. I think this question is a bit under focused sometimes. I think I have an answer to that, but maybe it's not. I would like to have a full picture and see what you think about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. This is very interesting questions. Incidentally, the master from whom the fifth Dharma received this system is Dzogchen Rinpoché. That's for you. And so I suppose that from his biography, we might get more hints about what are the reasons for his interest in that. It may be that there is an episode, for example, if suppose he gets the Jampel Tseda and Jampel Dzogchen at the same time, so that would really corroborate my hypothesis. So now to move to your question, well, that's very interesting. I mean, there is a very simple answer that is self-obvious for, I mean, in the present state of knowledge of the Tibetan religions, which is a historical answer. Like, well, if the genealogy of the teaching is Nyingma, then it's Nyingma. I mean, if the origin, but like this is not clear enough because, for example, let's say I take this other Hayagriva system, not the one I mentioned, but the other one, which is also practiced by the Gelugpa, by the Gelugpas, by the Sakyapas, and some Nyingmapas too, which is called Tamdin Sangdrup or Tamdin Sangkor, the secret cycle or secret practice of Hayagriva. Iconographically, it's a recognizable deity because it's a red heruka, so similar to the one I showed, but it has 8 legs and not 4. So we recognize on the tankas the Hayagriva with 8 legs. That's the secret and not the most secret. And for example, the lineage is nearly all Shangpa Kagyu, and then it goes through Sakyapas, and then it reaches Gelugpas. So you have people who practice that, who are 100% Gelugpas, and there are very, very few Nyingma masters in the lineage. So you could say, okay, I mean, these are Kagyupas who have termas. I mean, so it's Kagyu. I mean, it's terma. You can hear that with a little bit sectarian people in Buddhist centers. That's a Kagyu terma, you know. But the point is, I mean, it's okay. I mean, if you like to be the owners of that, okay. I mean, it's not a question of who owns it. It's actually a question, I think, which the Tibetology should develop, but I don't know who would like to do that. It's a question of liturgies. So I would say, I mean, to put it very simple, you have a ritual structure of sadhana according to its level, like what class of tantra or subclass of tantra it belongs to. And that would be, I mean, more or less common between all the Sarmapas on the one hand and all the Nyingmapas on the other hand. I think the Bönpos have their own system, which may be comparable. And what from my little knowledge, it's pretty similar to the Nyingma system. But like you have a sequence of things to be done, and this thing is really typically Nyingmapa. Like for example, when you have the offerings of Amrita, Torma, and Rakta, for example, on the altar you have the 2 little kapalas representing the Amrita and the Rakta, for example. This is done in a very specific way in the Nyingma tradition, and I think it does not exist, or at least it's not done in the same way in the modern traditions. That plus then, and that's the real question of liturgies, in fact, it's not well known, but from like discussions with lamas, I realized that more and more that in, let's say, school, whatever it may mean of Tibetan Buddhism, you have then a few liturgical systems. What I call a liturgy is a complete ritual system, which tells you how to do each practice, and also in many cases in what order. I mean, like with a annual cycle of main rituals to be performed. And that is, I mean, for example, in the Nyingma school, you have the Dojejak liturgy and you have the Minderling liturgy, and maybe one or two others, I don't know. But it's not like in the Gelugpas, although they don't have sub-schools, there are those who practice Gyuto liturgy, Gyume liturgy, I think Kumbum liturgy, for example. So this is not studied by the Tibetologists, but it should be, in fact, because if we could study that, we'd have a grammar, sort of a structure that would allow us to describe rituals more precisely. I mean, I'm sure that many colleagues have done it partly, but I've never read anything about the like main global liturgies in each school of Tibetan Buddhism. For example, there is typical Jangta liturgy, which is small. It's a small minority in the Nyingma school, but it's still very strongly alive in the Dojejak network of monasteries. So that's my main answer. Like from the structure of a sadhana, you can say if it's Nyingma or Sarma. I don't know. I'm not good enough to say if you could say for sure if it's Gelug, Sakya, Kagyu. I suppose there would be details, but as they use the basic same authorities, it may be more similar. But like Nyingma ritual is very, very typical. And my point was that the fifth Dalai Lama did, I mean, completely discouraged. He like there are very strong passages in some of his texts in which he criticizes those who have like watered down the Nyingma tradition by mixing Sarma elements in the rituals. But and then of course there is I mean that so first answer is history, second answer is liturgy, and third answer would be also terminology. I mean in the I mean in the Nyingma ritual you have a lot of specific vocabulary. In the Bön ritual you have a lot of specific vocabulary, and I think it's not that specific between like the Gelug and the Sakyapas, for example. There should be some, but it's more or less common. While the Kagyupas are maybe a little bit more specific, but belong to the same universe still. I don't know if it's a good enough answer. So history, vocabulary, liturgy, I would say.
Thank you, dear Stéphane, very much for your truly comprehensive answer. For me, it's clear now. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, I can restart. Ah, I see there's something in the chat. Oh, oh yeah, thank you for Brian Cuevas for the very, very clear remark. I think we should encourage our students to, I mean, those who are pretty talented and very systematic to go in that field of liturgy. I mean, because we are lacking even tools to describe what is going on, you know. So I think it's someone very intelligent should even invent, you know, like as there are systems to note choreography or something like that, like a sort of simplified system to note what is going on in rituals. So. Okay, so another remark or question, or should I go into the text?
If there are no more questions, yeah, I think you can go into the text, unless anybody has another point. There we go, Brian again, our silent speaker.
Yeah, that's my. In fact, that's really Thank you, Brian. It's really my insight is. I mean, right or wrong, but it's something like that. It's like my feeling is that, you know, it's not only my imagination that these instructions are missing, sort of, because of the structure of the empowerment, there is a sort of, how do you say? I don't know how to say that in proper English, but it's as if an empty space had been devised for something to fit in. So it's not, I mean, and because in fact, when you know the logic of these tantric systems, you know what is, I mean, it's not super creative, like you have a sort of common grammar, sort of. So it looks like an incomplete sentence. But from the normal syntax, you know that something should follow. And yeah, that's exactly what Tsongkhapa did for Vajrabhairava, and like injecting the missing Dzogchen, the missing completion. That's exactly my insight. That's why I was very happy to see you, because in fact, as you discussed that in Paris. So in fact, yeah, I mean, it could have been solved. I mean, the problem, if it's a problem, it's not a problem. It's like the gap or the empty space could have been filled by a terma. I mean, a sort of complementary terma to the original terma, but that's not what happened. So my idea is that they may, I mean, especially the fifth Dalai Lama, I have no clue of anybody who may have thought that before, but I mean, there is Seton Rinchen Gyaltsen earlier, who is a very prolific writer in this field, and plus the Jigungpas also, like Jigung Rinchen Punso and Jigung Chökyi these two lamas were very, very productive, and even Chökyi Darpa was a turtle himself and had also complementary revelations for this Yamantaka system, Manjushri Master of Life. But it does not seem he filled this like Dzogchen gap. But my feeling is, yeah, something like that. Actually, I think it's a very similar case, except that in the case you're mentioning, it has been done very officially and clearly, although not without debates. Maybe the debates are the reason why the fifth Dalai Lama did not go any further. And when I say he did not go any further, I've not seen the secret visions. I've not seen the text. So maybe he goes further in that context. I don't know. Thank you very much for your remark. That's exactly what I mean. I think Annie Block has raised hand.
Well, I bought your lotus feet. I have something to share which comes from Christian orthodoxy. It's a statement that liturgy is theology. And I understand that as liturgy integrates body, speech, and mind. So that's all.
No, I fully agree. In fact, I mean, at first, as a, let's say, Nyingmapologist, Tibetologist, fond of the Nyingma tradition, I was a bit frustrated with these later authors, like Rinzin Pema Chinle, Tadak Lingpa, Fifth Dalai Lama, and all, because when I looked to their writings, to me it was only rituals. But now I love reading these things, because, like in Rinzin Pema Chinle, for example, you have very wonderful developments about view, meditation, and all that come within meditation instructions that are themselves integrated into rituals. But I mean, this statement makes sense in many, many ways. But well, first of all, it's obvious that, like, let's say Vajrayana is a, I mean, I always found it very silly when I heard I will not name names, but here's some Lamas who says, like, if you essentialize, I mean, you cannot essentialize the essence is in the details. The details belong to the essence. You cannot, I mean, if you just give a general, abstract, vague idea, it's not the essence, it's just a mere preliminary introduction to the main thing. That plus, yeah, even like even in Catholic theology, you know, they say that that are, like, I think they call, I don't know in English how you say, but theological. There's a strange name in French. Like, it says like places, lieu théologique. In liturgy, it means that in some cases, for example, when they have like expanded the dogma, like deciding of, I don't know, the, you say, immaculate conception, whatever, one of the bases is it has been always implicitly believed because it's in the liturgy. And so they're quoting like the whatever, the Mass of the Holy Virgin Mary or something like that. So yeah, normally in a religion, especially one that is such an incredibly developed ritual array, or then sure, I mean, the liturgy incorporates a lot of theology, to say it, and in both ways. So it means that it illustrates, so it develops, so it makes it available through body, speech, and mind, as you say, but also in the other way around, like it's meant to be interpreted. It's supposed to be rich in meaning, and in some cases you can derive the correct idea from the details of the ritual. But I don't know if we can go any further in that direction, but yeah, I agree.
But I attended some teaching by Orthodox Christians, and what was striking is that they knew what they were doing. They knew the meaning and the depth of the gestures they had, because Christianity gestures are very important, the way you cross and so on. And that was extremely impressive. And also, if you see a well done ritual, you can feel it. It's, and it reminds me of my teacher, Stéphane Rinpoché. He was so picky about ritual. He trained the Lopön and all the people, the Westerners participating in the, for example, in the Dzogchen, Gana Puja. Years after year, they had to be perfect. And that was part of the way he trained some of us, and, perfectly, quote unquote, executed rituals. You can feel it. It's like, I would say, you see it in Lama dances. Lama dances were meant to communicate a state of mind. So, okay.
Yes, I agree. I have nothing to add. I think, I mean, it's just very interesting for Westerners, because there is a sort of, I would say, like, whatever, Protestant coloration that creeped into Buddhism, that goes with the idea that rituals are just outer cultural envelopes that we should get rid of. And I think if people are interested in practicing Tibetan Buddhism, this is a very, very bad, I mean, point to start with, because the ritual is so important to the Tibetans that at least, I mean, it should be understood. And I mean, if people want to get rid of, other complicated things or things, I mean, you cannot. I mean, suppose you're a Tibetan Buddhist, okay, but you will not make like this huge tormas with all the. It's too complicated. But I mean, normally it's also from the knowledge of the logic of the ritual. You know what is indispensable and what is ornament. But this needs a very profound, a very precise knowledge of the rituals.
Yeah.
Okay, so shall we shift to the text?
Okay.
I mean, I fully agree. So maybe I will
just
less of the ritual.
yeah, just something to add, because the Dalai Lama stated that Buddhist is a science of mind. Actually, it's a sense of body, speech, and mind. And if you have science, you have technology. And rituals are the technology of the science of body, speech, and mind. And the technology validates the science. They go, it's a circular.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it makes sense. Okay, so now just to get back to the text, that's, I don't know if it makes sense to everybody, but that's just to point where our text is. But I mean, if for those who read Tibetan, you can see that everything around is only Yamantaka things. I mean, maybe these names are not familiar even to those who read Tibetan, but like this Jampel Tseda, all this Tseda, Jampel Tseda Narpo, and this is the deity I showed you, and see the Chargazilnan is this deity too. And then after you have then the Shiwetinle. So that's a peaceful sadhana that comes from the same corpus. Actually, that's these two texts go together, but the second one is pretty poor in information, so I did not present it. But then Yondor Me Puji. So I think I've seen we have Amanda Brown in the audience, so she would know all these. So this is another form of Yamantaka from the same corpus of Mañjuśrī, Master of Life. And then so yeah, and then you have another one. Trochu Dugdong there. So there's a third main form of Yamantaka, and in the Mañjuśrī, Master of Life. And then the other things like Shinji. This is all again like other forms from other termas. So you can see it's like a small island of peaceful Mañjuśrī and Dzogchen in an ocean of Yamantaka things. So. Oh, incidentally, yeah, I did not say it, but now I see my own note. So that's the largest, more or less, Dzogchen writing by the fifth Dalai Lama. It's a bit curious for us because he was clearly very interested in Dzogchen. Again, I've not seen the Sangwa Gyatchen, the Sacred Visions, but among his writings, his personal writings, except that you have Dzogchen sections in tantric things, but the only things that are officially Dzogchen in his writings are this text of Jampa Dzogchen and a very short manual, but it's really like notes on the Kondo Nyingtik. So I mean, this is also important to realize the respective importance and also maybe to understand the fifth Dalai Lama's interests. Okay. So no, that's a description of what is there, but I think I should skip it because just I will give the overall global structure. So for Alexandra, the homage, it starts with the homage to Dzogchen Turing Rongdrol. And then the treasure discoverer, Padmasambhava, then the treasure discoverer, Sarben Chaume, and the Jandata Shitobgyal, and so forth. So, and then it has a list of the topics, supposedly 15, but I don't know how it really works. So in fact, because it says 15 topics, but then there are more. So then comes the sadhana, and then the empowerment ritual. And just, I mean, I will not go into all the subdivisions. So the sadhana, it has three parts, like introduction, main part, conclusion. So I will not describe all the 15 subdivisions of the preliminary part of the sadhana and so forth. But in the lineage prayer, so I again say that lineage does not, in that text, pass through Padmasambhava, but is introduced in Tibet by Mañjuśrī Micha, so which is a bit strange, who passes this directly to King Chisung Detsen, who gave it, then that's very interesting, to a secret spouse called the Shesa. There are various, like sometimes like Shelza, like the lady, the crystal lady, Dronchik, unique lamp. So it's very important because there are a lot of history of like female characters around the Chisung Detsen who play a special role in specific Dzogchen transmissions. The most well-known is the story of the princess, I forgot her name just now, Pemasel, who is the princess who dies, and then Chisung Detsen is so sad, and then he asks Padmasambhava to revive her. He revives her for a brief time in which he imparts her the Kondo Nyingtik, and then she re-dies. It's a very strange story. And then she's reborn after many reincarnations as Pema Lendilsel. So to 1291, 1319, who is the discoverer of the Kondo Nyingtik. And so there is a story that these female characters, more or less imaginary, in fact, I mean, are completely undocumented, are the so in that case, it's a secret spouse, like Sangyum of Chisung Detsen, it's called like that. Sometimes daughters, but they are the first, more or less imaginary, how do you say, how do you call that? Link in the chain of transmission. I mean, it should be it could be a topic for a paper in itself, like the female imaginary characters in the first generations of the Dzogchen transmissions. Like even like Yeshe Tsogyal is maybe not historically very well documented, but at least there is a lot of legends about Yeshe Tsogyal. It's pretty clear. But then there are a lot of other ones. And this is one. This one, Shelza Donchik or Shesa Donchik, I think she appears only in that context. She's otherwise not mentioned, as far as I know. And what is interesting, we could spend little time on that, is the words Tekchu and Togal occur in the lineage prayers. So I think we can skip all the details of the subsections of the introduction, and I think I've put the lineage prayer there. So yeah. So yeah, there is the list of all the lineage. But as usual, you know, normally in this time of sadhanas, you invoke all the lineage, and at the end, there is a sort of summary of the stages of the practice, because that's maybe a liturgy element. You ask all these Buddhas and masters to bless you so that you gain success in this in this practice. So if you look at it, for example, here, yeah, it like you have some prayers for the success of the development phase, and then after it goes like to the like Vajra recitation, and then there is allusion to like channels and subtle winds. And then after that, you are liberated from the two extremes, and Tekchu Togal. Here you have Tekchu Togal. So Tekchu Togal, for those of us who know a little bit of Dzogchen, or very much of Dzogchen, you are familiar with these words. But the thing is, normally these are not common Dzogchen words. Like in Semde or Longde, you don't receive. I mean, you have things that are similar to what is called Tekchu, but normally Tekchu is only occurring, the word Tekchu, the phrase Tekchu is only occurring in Mengade, and even more specifically in the context of visionary Dzogchen. Like I think it's not even in, for example, Guru Chewang's Sangyinamjor. So normally it goes with the very highest categories of Dzogchen. So it is interesting as a hint of what is really the practice. Well, to be honest, there are Gelug authors who blame the fifth Dalai Lama for injecting Dzogchen where they think it is not. That's the case with what's the name? Token, Nyingma, the author of the Dukta, the Siddhanta, the text, very famous text about the philosophical tenets. And he actually is the main author in the Gelug tradition for the secret cycle of Hayagriva. And there is a passage in which he says, well, he's mentioning these luminous visions, but it's not very much there in the Tantra. So maybe it has been added by later people. So it's very amusing, interestingly, that I mean, this is incidentally something weird, because these Amdo Gelug masters were not famous for being pro Nyingma that wrote these enormous commentaries on Hayagriva, pure Nyingma system. The strangest is the 18th century Mongolian writer Tarji Damsi Dorje, who wrote a complete like 2-3 volumes, I think 3 big volumes on most secret Hayagriva, in which he quotes exactly the Nyingma tantras and everything. And that's a Mongolian writer, so in a supposedly all Gelug environment. Sorry, I'm getting out of my topic. Yeah, so this is the main thing. The else, and finally, you obtain the primordial state of Samantabhadra, but that's not very surprising. The most surprising is Tekchu Togal in context. I mean, this is a strong hint that for the fifth Dalai Lama, this system belongs to the highest Dzogchen sections, although he does not say it clearly. Okay, that's the end of the just description of the introduction or preliminary part of the sadhana. So, well, if you'd like to see any of these passages, we'll see that later. There is no problem. But as you can see, I mean, if you are familiar with this type of materials, it's just normal Mahayoga practice. It's like not a few things are a bit strange, but it's basically standard. So no, that's the main part. Sorry, I forgot the first page number, but which all its subdivisions, and maybe we can have a look to the 31st section, or maybe I go to the end of the description of the volume and back to that, so that you just know basically what is there. I mean, and how weird is this text, in fact. So that's the passage, Nyingma Tradition, which, if you'd like, I will revert. I will come back to when we've seen all the description. So yeah, that's then the conclusion of the sadhana with protectors' offerings and all this. It's like there is a talk and all. And then from that point, it's also interesting, Fifth Dharma that proposes a more elaborate conclusion for the ritual from Longchenpa's Kondo Yangti, which is also, I mean, normally you don't mix in Tibetan system. You know, it has a very hierarchical, layered view. Like the Tibetans, they want to know what category a teaching belongs, to what category it belongs. And then they want, especially when they are very precise, as the Fifth Dalai Lama can be, they want only things that belong to the context. And it's typically the Fifth Dalai Lama would be someone who would blame someone who introduces irrelevant elements. So the thing that he says, you can use this conclusion from the Kondo Yangtik, is also a strong hint of what he does not say clearly, explicitly, which is what does Mañjuśrī's Dzogchen belong to as a practice? And that would be highest Dzogchen, like Inti. Yeah, that's just two strange things. So that's the passage. So you have the page number 375, when there is a mention of Chiti. And the other thing, interesting thing, is mention of Dorji Lingpa. So I've not, for the moment, I've not looked at what the Fifth Dalai Lama may be alluding to in Dorji Lingpa. It seems to say that in Dorji Lingpa's dharmas, there are things that are complementary or overlapping with this. But I don't know yet what it is. I've not thought of it. So if now we look to this passages about Chiti, you'll see it's not very, I mean, it's not, the meaning is not absolutely transparent. So this and then Chisung Detsen. So Chisung Detsen had a wife with proper characteristics, means that was qualified as for the completion phase practices. Jomwa Shesadun, so that's one of the spelling of Donchik, sorry. That's one of the her name. So no, sorry, he Chisung Detsen and is qualified Yum Jomo Shesadun Ma. These two, there were the Dulja, those who were predestined to receive this teaching. In that case, that means Zine. So having seen that, and then he made three ways of explaining these Mañjuśrī tantras. And sort of like basing himself or ourselves, in fact, on the commentaries of the scripture. And then that's interesting. Jachewa Chiti Tarshe. So in a vast way, whatever this may mean, or in details, Chiti Tarshe, he explained, or it was explained, Chiti Tar in the way of Chiti. So this is the only words that may indicate to what category this teaching belongs, which would be Dzogchen Chiti, as a subdivision of the Mengade. But it also seems to mean that these same tantras can be explained otherwise. And again, the tantras that are the basis of Chiti are overlapping with those that are the basis of Yangti. And it to such an extent that Jean-Luc Achard in his Chiti paper, in the bibliography, he gives just a common list for Yangti and Chiti. So this is important, incidentally, because Yangti is regarded by many of the contemporary or recent Nyingma masters as the supreme coronation of Dzogchen. So we are in a Namkhai Nobo Rinpoche connected context, and he was extremely fond of Yongdzin Rinpoché, of the black quintessence, and seemed to present it as the supreme teaching of Dzogchen, if I remember well what I understood, what I heard from him, but very long ago. So that's interesting. And then we reach the empowerment. So there is also a strange thing which is that the fifth Dalai Lama mentions 4 empowerments, one which is very classical, but in fact it seems that there is only 2. One is looks like vase empowerment with all its subdivisions, and then there is a Toma empowerment which he explicitly adds. And that seems to be all, except that there is a more direct introduction following. And then normally like a mandala offering to show gratitude, offering what's more. So we could, if you'd like, and if we have time, we can have a look to this moche also. Then you will see it's very typical of highest Dzogchen systems. Okay, so basically that's it. Maybe I can give my conclusion and then we discuss a little bit, and if you like, revert to the Dzogchen instructions. So that's the conclusion of the text. So what is interesting is that he's mentioning especially Rigdzin Pema Chinle as the, how do you say, dedicataire, the one for whom this text was composed, and maybe we requested the composition. And other, but it's also dedicated to other lamas like Kanjurwa, Tedrak Lingpa, and so forth. Incidentally, something interesting for Jangta studies is that when he uses the phrase Rigdzin Khenpo, which nowadays in Northern Treasures tradition means the Tülku of Rigdzin Godem. It's Chadzan Rigdzin Khenpo, which must be a family lineage descendant of Rigdzin Godem. So it seems it's very interesting for Northern Treasures tradition, because it's difficult to say when the authority in this tradition shifted to Dorje Drak monastery. So it seems that in that time, although the fifth Dalai Lama was sort of building up, patronizing, supporting Dorje Drak, still there is the idea that the main authority is still in Rio Chazang, and that's the original place where Rigdzin Godem lived. Okay, so that's and that's the person is called Tuchol Öbar, and that's the Rigdzin Khenpo. And he explains which are the source from which he borrowed, but that's not very enlightening. And it ends with a date of composition, which has to be 1673, I think. So that's it. So now we can either discuss a little more or revert to the Tibetan text, or both. I mean, we can have a short discussion and then revert to the Tibetan text if you'd like. Oh, someone asked if we have an English translation of this manual. The answer is no. I mean, nobody has been interested in probably, I think. I mean, I know like Jean-Luc Achard, for example, I mean, like as a universal specialist of Dzogchen, is very aware of that cycle. But I think nobody has really been interested in it earlier. And one of the reasons is that there is just this text left. So, and it basically is just Mañjuśrī sadhana with some Dzogchen instructions and Mañjuśrī empowerment texts. Actually, the real question is, well, one of the question is, why is it so important to the fifth Dalai Lama? But this question will be difficult to answer as long as we don't have the original Terma text. So I'm a bit discussing also. In this way also I'm discussing about something missing. I was discussing about the missing Dzogchen instructions of Yamantaka, and in fact this text is also a manual for something that we do not have fully. I think, I mean, in Tibet nothing is ever lost forever, because the paper does not rot, the climate preserves it very well. So if there is any copy anywhere, we can find it even after 500 years. But so far it's not re-emerged as far as I know. So yeah, it would make more. And I think, you know, there is a the only other text we have on this cycle is a Monlam, so aspiration prayer by Mipham, Jamgonju Mipham. And it is not apparent to me that he had access to the text, except the Fifth Dalai Lama's text. And in the compilation of the Rinchen Terze, they also put only that text. So it's pretty strong hints that it was not available in Eastern Tibet. And yeah, I think, you know, this is, I see that Tenpa Tsering Batsang is among us. So I thank him again for his wonderful paper, which I encourage him to write, but about the destruction caused by the Dzungars in 1717, 1718, because it's sort of why the Fifth Dalai Lama's record of teaching received is so wonderful for the Nyingma tradition. Is because he also describes things we do not have. I mean, and maybe they are not lost forever, but in many cases, it's very likely that the lineages were interrupted or the materials were not available after this invasion. So it's not, I mean, it's not something that is, I mean, it occurred to my mind around the IETS in 2019 that the Nyingma school, as we know it, is largely a 18th century, 19th century reconstruction. But a lot of things got lost then. Like when even this morning, I was looking into the termas of Nyingma as described by the Fifth Dalai Lama. I think we have 10% of what is described. I mean, this may not be self-obvious for some of you, but Nyara Nyingma is supposed to be one of the pillars of the Nyingma tradition. Nyarel Chewang. I mean, the northern treasures we have complete, but the earlier two main, regarded as main Dzogchen corpora, so Nyarel and Chewang, we have only bits. So I'm very eager to gathering all that may remain and get that published at least in a clean, readable way. But so yeah, another remark, a question?
Well, I have one question. Thank you very much for your wonderful talk. As far as Dzogchen is concerned, Dzogchen, the Adi Dzogchen is considered to be the highest, right, philosophically. But then it has categories like Chitti, Yangdi, and Sangdi, and all these three aspects, are they sort of philosophically, are they higher than the Adi Dzogchen, or are they just an offshoot of some sort of methodical sort of aspect of Adi Dzogchen?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I will answer one way, but I encourage you to, as we have opportunities to work together, to ask Jean-Luc Achard also, because he's really, he will not answer the same way I will. And he's a very good specialist, so it's a good idea to ask him and you have access to him. Yeah, in fact, there are very precise doxographies, to use Jean-Luc's phraseology, with divisions of Dzogchen, which are presented as hierarchical. And basically the division, what they all agree on, basically the Nyingmapas from centuries ago, maybe from 1,000 years ago, is about the idea of three sections, Semde, Longde, Mengade. And then they have the idea that Mengade is further subdivided. And but then they don't agree on how it's subdivided. The most classical subdivision nowadays is with outer Qi Nan San, Yang San, and the Yang San is the so-called Ningtik, out essence. So outer, inner, secret, even more secret. And another alternative division is Sende, Longde, Mengade, and then in Megande, Ati, Chiti, Yangti, Tachen. These four. So these divisions into four do not overlap. I mean, it's not coherent. And some Nyingma authors try to combine them, but it does not work. So the truth, I mean, the factual, historical truth, that what we know is that these groups of these subdivisions of Dzogchen corresponds to textual corpora. Like we have Semde Tantras, Longde Tantras, Mengade Tantras. In the Mengade, some are said to be Qi, Nan, San, Yang San, or Ati, Chiti, Yangti, Tachen. So then the Nyingmapas, including Longchenpa and others, have produced description of the views of these sections, with the idea that Longde is more profound than Semde, Mengade is more profound than Longde, and then in Mengade, but honestly, I mean, I think I can say I'm a specialist of these things, not from the academic point of view, but also I was a student of Nyoshül Khenpo, I think, who had a good knowledge of Dzogchen. So I'm not convinced by this. I mean, to me, it's I think these things are more like various schools, various local developments, various groups, and that's it's just Mahayana Buddhist or maybe general Buddhist way of dealing with complexity and contradictions or heterogeneity to construct hierarchies. I mean, if you have like, I mean, another example would be so-called Anu Yoga Tantra. You know, the Nyingmapas, they say Mahayoga is more Kerim, like development state, and the Anu Yoga is more completion phase. But if you read the real tantras of Anu Yoga, there is no more completion phase than in Mahayoga. So, I mean, basically, I think it's better not, I mean, an extreme that would be to say these distinctions are completely fake. These things do not exist. It's just verbiage, you know, it's just like, it exists, you know, in some esoteric traditions, you see, and you invent layers of profundity just to present your teaching as being supremely profound, but then the lower levels are just imaginary. They don't exist. They don't correspond to anything. In that case, it's not that. The texts do exist, and the practices must have existed, but in some cases, the practices are extinct. And now, I think from a philosophical, I think Jean-Luc Achard would tell you that, would tell you that these descriptions of various levels of philosophical depth are to be taken seriously, but I don't. Honestly, I don't. I mean, I think it's just because sometimes, it's like you described Semde, it's supremely profound. And then they tell you Longde is even more profound for that reason. But in some cases, it's not really a question of, in my point of view, it's only my understanding, it's my very limited understanding. But it's not really that it's more profound. It's that you get additional, for example, practical tricks to integrate that view. For example, in Hongdae, you have more bodily exercises, and the instructions are really different. And then in Mengade, especially Ningtik, you get this visionary development and all. But I think the idea that I think Dzogchen view is pretty. What it has become anyway. It's very homogeneous. I mean, the key idea is just that it's the ultimate nature that recognizes itself and nothing lacks in it. So it's not our ordinary minds that gets enlightened. It's the essence of our mind, which is eternally enlightened, that just recognizes itself. And if you try to do that with your ordinary mind, it will not work. So basically it's that. And then explanation that still this ordinary mind is an expression or display of this ultimate nature. That's basic what the Dzogchen says. And then in some forms of Dzogchen, you have very little practice instructions, which also makes sense, because if it's only ultimate nature that recognizes itself, why should we have something to do? Ordinary mind. Yes. But in globally, the Tibetans, maybe because they are not so much Chan or Zen style, but they are used to Tantra with secret instructions. They prefer the forms of Dzogchen in which you have more techniques, so to say. So they regard these forms as more profound. But honestly, I can accept that these techniques are very efficient and lead us to the goal, so to say, quicker. Okay, but that philosophically one section is more profound than the other. I'm supposed to be a specialist of Longchenpa, so I've read these descriptions dozens of times, and to me it makes no sense. It doesn't make sense. I cannot understand philosophically this supposed superiority of superior sections compared to inferior ones, so-called. But maybe it's just because I'm an idiot. I mean, in Tibetan tradition, it's really say that they are even more profound. But as you know, from the moment you say it's not views that can be realized by the conceptual mind, then the concepts you used to describe the superiority of the one to the other, for me, is a bit, as you say, elusive to say.
Yes.
What I can say is the different groups of texts that really exist, so it's just not mere names, different practices. In some cases, the practices seem to be lost. Because that's another aspect, like the Nyingma tantric tradition is like a forest, and it's immense. And a lot of it seems to be either dead, I mean, like no transmission anymore, or living dead. Like what I call living dead tradition is when you still have the empowerments and but nobody practices anymore and can guide you if you want to learn. You have to refine to reconstruct the know-how by yourself.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Tapala.
Stéphane, we have a question in the chat. If you want, I can read it out loud from Iris.
So do you think the Jambal Shalom, the first Lama should be considered particularly a primary for the Jambal Seda? That's interesting, but that's completely beyond my reach. I mean, I do not see for the moment whether the fifth Dalai Lama has any serious intention to bridge the Gelug and Nyingma traditions. I mean, what we can understand from his politics is that his view of Tibetan society was like organic. I mean, it's not like a mineral unity, like everybody the same everywhere. It's like an organism with like the liver is not performing the same function as stomach or brain or eyes. So it seems that he has more the idea of combining heterogeneous things into a living unity. But I'm not sure he wished the Gelugpas to practice Nyingma stuff or the Nyingmapas to study the Lamrim. I'm not sure. I mean, the present Dalai Lama is more into this approach, I think. Like I think he's more like when he's teaching Dzogchen, you can see that he's thinking of Samadhupa, of the Guya Samaja. And maybe when he's teaching Guya Samaja that he's thinking of Dzogchen, this I don't know. But I mean, in the modern time, there is more a tendency to synthesis. But I'm not sure the fifth Dalai Lama is into that. So I mean, for the moment, it's completely obscure to me what is really even just his own point of view, like what he really believes, and then what he expected others to do, like for example, do Lamrim, and then maybe Sarma Yidam, and then Dzogchen, whatever. This I don't understand. Honestly, for the moment, I don't know. Maybe some have more read of his writings, but it's something you really have to read a lot because, how to say, Tibetans, when they write, they are very respectful of canons or norms. And one of the most, I remember I had this discussion once with Matthew Capstein, and he found my point of view idiotic because I was discussing what is not there. And I mean, my point was Tibetans, they have a very, how do you say, a strong tendency to, how do you say, how do you call that?
Hierarchy?
What I mean is even like suppose Mipham, for example. Mipham wrote about everything, but then Mipham like would have a description of the body. I don't know, in a Kala chakra context, in medical context, in a Dzogchen context, whatever. And in each case, although he's one who is most open to these interactions, but he treats one topic according to the genre of the text he's composing. You see what I mean? It's like you have a plenty of how do you call that? In French, we say dead angles, or you can say blind spots. Like you cannot, like if you want to treat bodies as something global, I mean, combining medicine, Kala Chakra, Havadra, Nyingma stuff and all, it's it's difficult for Tibetan traditional writers. So typically when we are asking this type of questions, we're asking about a blind spot, you know, because there is no space, there is no place in a Lamrim text in which you can say, you can even mention for what tantric practice it is devised. Because by hypothesis, it's a sutra teaching, and so it's accessible to people without empowerment, to whom it is forbidden to speak about a secret mantra practice. See, so in many, for many such reasons, I think you would have, how do you say, questions that can be answered only from reading the whole corpus, the biography, the letters, and inferring from what he says or does not say to what he thinks actually. I don't know if my answer is good, but I think that the name Jampa Shelung does not imply that he has other, because also, you know, he also wrote like Vajrabhairava sadhanas, for example. So he's not, I mean, it's not even plain. I mean, my basic assumption, that it's like basic level assumption is the fifth Dalai Lama first is from a Nyingma family, and then has a strong belief that Nyingma magic is very, very efficient. So a lot of his Nyingma writings are about very powerful things, not that much about meditation things. So what can be said, I mean, from a very superficial explanation, is that he was persuaded for any reason that the Nyingma stuff, and especially Jangter materials, Northern Treasures materials, were super powerful to get rid of his enemies, outer, inner, visible, invisible enemies. That's pretty plain. No, he was also a man with spiritual concerns. He was not only a statesman doing magic, but his conviction, his spiritual aims and all, that's much more subtle. That's much more difficult to tell. That's for further inquiry. Okay, another question or remark? Maybe I can give my global conclusions, and then if you're not exhausted and you still have time, maybe we can go back to the instruction text. So it's more a conclusion for researchers. So that's what is ahead of us with this corpus. First, find the original terma of Mañjuśrī's Dzogchen, because else it's difficult to know. Then try to identify how other figures, I mean, other than Sarben Chome, contributed, especially Guru Chewang, but maybe also Nyarani was there. I think that's interesting. But the reason why it's interesting is because some of these things may still be available in other corpora, like in their termas. And then find Janda Tashi Topgel's writings. That's a very important issue. Janda Tashi Topgel, so as I told you, is like second half of 16th century man. I strongly suspect, but that's also one of my fantasies. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's a prophecy. We'll know in 50 years. But I think he may have compiled a proto-Rinchen Terze. He received systematically all the termas. And there is a known prayer to the Tertons that may have been composed by him, that may have been composed for giving this transmission of all the termas that he gathered. I don't say that he wrote something, but I think that he compiled texts. And Janda Tashi Topgel was very, good at writing liturgic, like practice texts from termas. So this may have existed, and it seems to be lost. Then explore the issue of the connection of Mañjuśrī's Dzogchen with Chiti, which would also mean explore further the Chiti corpus. I mean, we have for example, in the Fifth Dalai Lama Scenic, but also in the catalogs of the Nyingma Gyubum, we have a list of the tantras that are supposed to be Chiti. And that's the next one is next two ones are my most daring hypothesis. Explore the hypothesis of a Chiti and Yangti Mañjuśrī associated Dzogchen family. That would be for David Germano. I mean, like the idea that is there not a family of Dzogchen, something that gradually grows, which is based on Mañjuśrī tantras, and the coronation is the black quintessence, the Yangti Nakpo, And maybe the first stage is Mañjuśrī's Dzogchen, and in between you have other things, something like that. And correlatively explore the hypothesis of a Nyingtik Hayagriva Vajravari associated Dzogchen. I mean, the question is in Kando Nyingtik, and when we say Kando Nyingtik, that means also then Gompa Zangtel, and the Northern Treasures, and then further for the other things. The deities, main deities are Vajravari and Hayagriva. And so the same idea, is it not stemming from the original Tamdinyan Sangtepa, the most secret Hayagriva? I don't know. That's another hypothesis. No more easy. I try to understand better from biography and other writings the reason why the fifth Dalai Lama devoted efforts to this specific cycle, and that goes together, try to figure out what was the fifth Dalai Lama's personal understanding of Dzogchen, especially in relation to his more geluk or scholastic writings. Is it just mere juxtaposition, or is it synthesis? Like, did he have a global common understanding of both these materials? I don't know. And finally, explore in what way this specific approach was perceived in later Tibetan tradition. What I mean is the heritage of the fifth Dalai Lama, both on the Gelug side. What's the posterity of his Nyingma style writings in Gelug monasteries? I mean, this type of mixture of Gelug and Nyingma, as you know, was hated, really hated by some Gelugpas. I mean, we can say that a lot of the Shugden issue is about purifying the Gelug tradition from Nyingma materials. I mean, what they hate most is not the Nyingmapas, it's the Gelugpas who turn Nyingma, like the Gelugpas who practice Nyingma things. So basically that means the fifth Dalai Lama. I mean, it's not very openly said, but it means that the exclusivist Gelugpas maybe unconsciously hate the fifth Dalai Lama above all, because he's the very incarnation of what they did not like. But also on the Nyingma side, and especially the Jangta Dojidrak tradition, that counts the fifth Dalai Lama as one of their lineage masters. So what's the, to what actual degree do they integrate? Do they practice? Do they, because I mean, when I was in Dojidrak in Shimla, and I was mentioning this type of thing, they regard it as very specific, as if it were another branch. They say, yeah, that's the fifth Dalai Lama thing. So, I mean, it's not that they don't like it, but they regard it as something specific. So my point is, who is now the custodian of that? So there are people like among the Gelugpas who are holders of these lineages, but what are they doing of it? How the Nyingmapas consider that? That's it's a topic for field work, you know, like it's very funny when you try asking questions and you get embarrassed answers or whatever. So yeah, that's it. So now the time is about finished, but if you'd absolutely like, or if some of you would like, we can revert to the Dzogchen part of the accomplishing phase instruction of the sadhana. It's as you like, or we can just close here, because at some time even the best things must end, and I will write a paper with more details and more precise information on that later.
Thank you so much, Stéphane. Regarding your continuing, I'm not sure how people are. We're still quite a few people. We're 37 of us in here. Some of us might have commitments, might need to go. Maybe we could say something like 10, 15 minutes more so people have an idea. If you can sum up your conclusions in 10, 15 minutes. As you mentioned, you'll be doing a paper on it. So
yeah. Well, no, I've already given all my conclusions, which were all these questions. But what I suggest is we can have a look, because we've turned around it, but to the actual instructions in the text. Right. And it is pretty short. In fact, the text is not long. So we can read a few lines of that.
Okay, perfect. Let's go for it then.
Okay.
So, okay.
I just have to get back to it. Where is it? Must be that. So yeah, you can see. So the 22nd point, I think I wrote 21st. Sorry, is the completion phase. So some generation. So this this essence of the mind, this primarily pure essence of the mind that is devoid of it's unspeakable and unthinkable, is actually the Buddha, Maga means unobstructed, Salwa is like radiantly clear, something like that. So abiding continuously in that is what is Tanyiki Gomdang Drupa, is what is conventionally called meditation and practice. Jagyu meparzo. But in fact, Jagyu meparzo, it's already complete without having to do anything. So that's standard Dzogchen view. Chi rongri chuku dapala ki shi mebe le dan namin me. So what for chi chir? I think it means, and what's the reason? Because so rongrik in our own rikpa chukur dakbala, which is pure as the Dharmakaya, pure as being, insofar as it is the Dharmakaya. Kishi mepe, there is neither production or birth, there is neither birth nor death. Le dan namin me, so there is no action, le or karma, no, rather there is no action, and namin fructification, like retribution. I mean, neither action nor the fruits of action. And this being so, and because there is not, deme, there is neither development nor completion either. There is none of these. There is not even the name of delusion and dual liberation. And literally in the meaning of the non-existence of their absence, in the truth of their absence, Nyampe Gyalpo Sha rest as the king of unity. If you meditate just one session, I think Dampe Tun of one clear session or one session of clarity, I suppose, Gomna Korwaji, the samsara is destroyed. So the bodhicitta, but in Dzogchen, bodhicitta means nature of mind, ultimate nature of mind, of the Orchikpa, of the Sugatas, of the Buddhas, Yanda Nyingpo Uki Pongpo Chien, and is literally is a perfect essence, Uki Pongpo Chien, endowed, that's a bit strange phrase, endowed with an aggregate of light. Yini, Chikyang Kyamni Kundu Kyap, Neni, so like as regards its being, Chi Yin, it is one, Kyapni Kundu Kyap, but as regards its pervasion, Kundu Kyap, it pervades to everything. Neni, as regards its abode, Taktu Ningi Una O. So that's typical hardest instinct, because it always Taktu Ningi Una. It is always in the middle of the heart. So you know that's in the visionary Dzogchen there is insistence that the Rigpa abides in the heart. So that's typical of higher Dzogchen. Sel tong chokchu dusum kundusel, and it's clear and empty. Sel tong and chokchu dusum kundusel, and it radiates, or it's clear in the 10 direction and the 3 times. And as this is one's own light, so normally this comes in the context like of Bardo teachings, in which you should not mistake the visions for things foreign to yourself. So so if you recognize, so since it is your own clarity, so if you recognize it, the bodies, honorifics, it means the visions of bodies, like in integral visions, and the primordial wisdom, or whatever you like to call it, but in that case it alludes to not something psychological, but to aspects of the visions. And are liberated as the pure lands of the victorious. And and one is devoid of the Khen, the defects of the perception of impure karma, ordinary perception. Rangwe Maché, not knowing one's own clarity, lu dans Bachagi Nawe, Gochi Trupa Gyakene. I think so. This is a bit difficult. So, so if one does not recognize one's own clarity, or these as being one's clarity, then there is so go and gya. So I think in that case, go and gya, it's found in some Dzogchen texts. It alludes to something you are enclosed in. So gya is like a net, you know, and go in this case is like I think it's means like a shell. So now I go so it's something like you get caught. It generates the network of delusion and the outer shell of perceptions in which you're caught. And then you will not make the encounter of by yourself of the primordial wisdom that is inherent in you. And that's very interesting. And that's why Luni, as regards the body, that Dansung Chokpu is the squated sage, no posture. It's one of the Tögal posture. So that's very interesting because you don't find it like in even in the most like lowest tantras in which you get some luminous visions. They are said to appear while you are in the 7-point normal meditation posture. So the Dansung Chokpu is really a Tögal posture. Yes, squatted, you can say, squatting sage posture. Longni ngalwa mingni zimburta. So longni, I think it's a mistake. It's not ngalwa, it's dalwa. Slow breath. That's very standard instruction in Tögal also. Mingni zimburta. So I don't know, maybe Tempala you would know what is zimbur here, but it's an instruction about tatang, about how to look.
It refers to like simpurta, maybe it refers to not widely open, but very close sort of.
Okay, so normally in the Tögal instructions, you either look up or down or in front and sometimes to the sides. So I don't know in that case. And then having directly perceived primordial wisdom, you'll be liberated. So it's very clear allusion to the luminous visions. So you practice the body posture, eye postures, slow breathing with the outer retentions, and then you'll get the visions that will liberate you. Tene langdormebe duktangi, and then in duktang, an attitude of langdormepa. Duktang could be body posture also, but in that case, I think attitude of langdormepa, neither assuming nor rejecting. Dangme longching teke migita. So Dangme Longqing means you should bind the winds of clarity. So normally Dharma is the pure part of the elements. Though in that case it alludes to something. Normally in Tögal you rather do empty retentions, but Dangme Longqing, normally Longqing more typically means like retention with full long. Teke migita, so you look straight in front. And then that's the name of the first Tögal vision. You will perceive the primordial wisdom of tuning onsum, of the direct perception of dharmata. Maybe I don't know if it's useful that I go on because you see it's just like the instructions for the luminous visions, and my point is that it's very short, but it's pretty complete, although it does not have the full jargon or the full terminology of a superior Dzogchen with the 6 lamps and everything. And as you can see, there is not all the all the postures. If I go a little further, if I manage. Yeah, just after that you have Nyam. Oh, sorry. So here, I don't know if I don't know what's happening. It's too secret to be presented. Well, okay, I will stop there. So, well, the point is then you get you have the name, the typical names of the Tegal vision, Tuning Onsum, Yamnangompe, Rikpatsipet, and Tunizepa. So, I mean, normally this cannot occur in a little bit lower level Dzogchen text. So whether it was added by the fifth Dalai Lama or not is very interesting. And now if we could find the original terma, it would be very precious because there is still a lot of speculation about where, when do these instructions appear. I think now the thesis, the idea that Jean-Luc Achard was alone to defend among Tibetologists in the 1990s is partly validated. Like it's now sure that the full luminous vision system existed at least in the 11th century. But now to go even further, that would be interesting because what seems in the Nyingma traditions is that you have a lot of things. When I was mentioning like living dead traditions, it looks as if they had been stratas, or I don't know how to say that. It's like archaeology, you see like remaining stratas of things that are no longer there, but when you examine them, they look like prototypes, not fully complete, but prototypes of what then became later dominant. Okay, so I think that it's already pretty late, so I'm still available to discuss with those who would like, and else I think it's enough. That was just a little, how do you say, overview to show you how interesting this cycle can be.
Thank you, Stéphane. That was fantastic, very comprehensive. So really thank you. And also thank you all for joining us today. I see many new people and many new names. So maybe you can see this talk again on YouTube in case you arrived late. Some of you did. And we have a YouTube channel, and also we have the Shangshung. I'll write you the address on here in case you haven't looked at the website. We do have an archive of different past talks and various events we had. So you're welcome to have a look at the website. And we have more talks planned. I think in November we have Charles Ramble from Paris also. We'll do the talk in Oxford. There's the 25th celebration of Tibetan studies at Oxford University. So if any of you are planning to go there, we'll see you there. I think Karma Puntsok will be talking. He's the guest lecturer for the ARIS lecture, this yearly lecture. And there's a little party for the 25 years. So we're organizing a talk with Charles Ramble. So yeah, please do look at our website. And thank you all for joining. And Stéphane, thank you again so much. Best of luck with your work. Do let me know when your article is out. We can send it out. We can also put it up on our social media and all for people to go and see it.
Thank you again for your invitation, and thank you all for your patience in listening to my talk.
No, fantastic work, and congratulations, really. So many topics. You've done a very impressive work you've done over the years, really. So much. So congratulations, really. Thank you, everybody, and have a lovely Sunday evening then. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.